Top of the hour. It's 1 o'clock on the West Coast, 4 o'clock on the East Coast. Let's go ahead and get started. I will share my screen, and there you have it. No JV partners are yet on the webinar, but I had some good stuff to tell you about that just happened earlier this morning, so I'll go ahead and give you some things that I have learned earlier today. And the first thing is that I want to talk to you about is licensing possibilities. And let me give it to you this way. So these are the, oh, there's Mr. Palumbo. How are you? There are some possibilities that you can have. I'm going to give you this as an example. So my one of my clients, Bill DeWeese, who you've heard about before if you've watched these webinars, has started to really create some traction for himself. So what happened recently, and Bill DeWeese is doing voiceover work, okay? And so think about this in your own business, whatever it is. So if he's doing voiceover work, what happened was this. He's started to develop quite a nice following. He's got about 1,600 subscribers to his YouTube channel. I can actually show you that right here so you can see it as well. So we go to YouTube, and we put in Bill DeWeese channel. You can see here, where is he, Bill DeWeese? You can see here he's got 148,000 views, and it should show up as number of subscribers. It usually does right here. I'm not understanding why it's not showing. Huh, that's interesting. He has got subscribers there, 1,659. 1,650, almost 1,700 subscribers, which is a decent amount in his field because it's not that big a field. So what happened was that recently he made mention of the fact that he was using a certain kind of studio audio containment room. I don't want to give out the exact name, but he was using one, and what happened was we got a, and let's call it quiet room to make it easy. Quiet room, and we got an email from number one manufacturer, vendor, let's call it. And what happened was this vendor said, hey, it was very nice of you to mention our name and the fact that you're blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So what I did is I followed up with a phone call to this particular vendor, and I said, hey, by the way, I represent Bill DeWeese. I'm his agent, and that's what I say I am, and he's given me permission to do so. And I say that, Bill is interested in, we're going to be working with a number of different vendors to create sponsorships. And I said, are you the person? And after a long conversation, she basically said, no, I'm not. I said, well, could you give me that name? She said, no, you give me your information. I will forward it on to them. Now, it should be remembered that the vendor that I contacted, this one, vendor number one, is probably the big dog in the market. Now, what I then did almost immediately is I discovered who vendor number two was. And what I did was I contacted this particular vendor, vendor number two. And they are sort of probably either in second or third place in this quiet room, creating audio quiet rooms. And what I did was I said, hey, look, I am looking to find sponsorships for my client, Bill DeWeese. I gave her all of him all the information, and I spoke to one of the principals. So obviously the fact that I was speaking to one of the owners indicated to me that this is a smaller company and didn't have as much of a hierarchy as vendor number one, which to me is a good thing because number one, I'm speaking to a person who can actually make a decision. That in this case is vendor number two. And in this vendor number one example, I was speaking to someone who would hand my information to someone else. Whether or not that happens is yet to be seen. But I did tell vendor number one that we are contacting other people in this area for sponsorships. Now, the interesting thing about this scenario is that right now, Bill DeWeese is actually using the quiet room that vendor number one, it's their unit. Vendor number two, on the other hand, when Bill followed up with an email, as I suggested, I said, hey, please tell them, the vendor number 2 person, the owner, said to me, well, could you send me some information about him and blah, blah, blah. So we sent him a bunch of links to legitimize him, sent him to the YouTube channel to show him how many people there were. But the other thing was that as part of the sponsorship that I was offering him, I included a number of things. I put, an interview with him on the YouTube channel, These were the things that I told him would be part of sponsorships, or that Bill told him would be part of sponsorships in the email that I gave him suggestions on what to send. I also told him that in addition to the interview with him on the YouTube channel, and I thought this was kind of clever on my part, I said that we would, if he became a sponsor, and we don't yet know the numbers, but if he became a sponsor, we would do a video of Bill removing the current vendor's quiet room and installing the vendor number 2 quiet room, which I think would be pretty funny. Basically, hey, we've determined that your machine works better than his or hers, so vendor number 1 would be getting the boot in favor of vendor number 2, and that would be part of. Now, naturally, what we would be angling for, of course, is a free quiet room that they would send to Bill, and Bill would sell the other one on eBay or whatever. And so that would be pretty cool. This person, vendor number 2, because they were smaller, because I was talking to the president, seemed very, very interested in this arrangement. And the point of this whole exercise is to show you that when you are involved in information marketing and you're doing something on even not a big scale, on a reasonable size scale, that the chances for getting sponsorship is not that it's significant, but it certainly exists and it's worth pursuing. Now, in Bill's case, he's in a relatively small market niche. On YouTube, he's at 150,000 views or so. He's got 1,600 subscribers. That's nothing massive, but in his field, he is getting to be. Now, the other thing that I had Bill send him was this, which is that also, and this just happened earlier today because we realized we had some things wrong, I had him, Bill, send a link to the guy that we talked to about this, about his book, which has now got 16 stars. It's a #1 bestseller in general broadcasting. And so, this is pretty cool. This bestseller little sticker here, that helps. That lets, the person know that I'm trying to close on this deal. So what's my goal? My goal is actually, and I would prefer to work with vendor 2 than vendor 1. But my goal here, and let's go ahead and erase all this. For those of you who came in a little bit late, feel free to go back and watch the video review of this. We record all these, and it'll be up within, by tomorrow or so. So what I would encourage you to do is watch it if you missed this first part of the webinar, because it'll be incredibly valuable to you as it relates to licensing. So what I'm hoping will happen is, I prefer to work with a vendor, a smaller vendor, because they're looking for ways to really break into the market. The vendor number 1 at the top is sort of like, prove it to me that you're any good. But let me tell you, I am expecting to get contacted by the bigger vendor if we ever do a video that shows us removing the quiet room that I'm talking about from vendor number 1 and replacing it with a smaller vendor. Smaller vendors are also much more open to deals like this, because so what we're looking for is sponsorship. And so in my mind, sponsorship entails a few things. First off, from them, we get money. And in exchange, we give the following. A video interview, a banner with a link on the website. We give them a video of the other device being removed and theirs being put in. I might add being put in for free. And we'll come up with maybe a few other things, but the big thing is here that now all of a sudden, basically, Bill DeWeese ends up endorsing the smaller vendor, and that's what the sponsorship entails. Now, what is this amount? How much am I going to be asking for? And the answer is, I have no friggin' clue. But I want to get as much as possible, whatever that number is. So, I mean, and this is kind of nice because, in my relationship with Bill DeWeese, and since he's my JV partner, I get a split. I get 50%, more or less, of the net of the info products we sell. And last month, my check was close to $5,000, which is kind of nice. Thank you, Bill. But also, I'm going to get a piece of all this sponsorship money, so I'm going to work my butt to get as much as possible, as long as I can. And by the way, when I spoke to the vendor, I said, look, I know you're a small business person. If one of the owners of the company is actually answering the phone, that indicates to me, obviously, that they're a smaller company, that I need to prove to them that this sponsorship is going to work. And by work, I mean it's going to be generating them business. So what I suggested is that Bill, I asked Bill to send an email with all the particulars that I had sort of included, and he is volunteering to get on the phone with this particular individual who is one of the owners of the smaller vendor and tell him a little bit about who he is, what he does. And one of the lines that Bill told me is, it's amazing how often people will say to him, oh, as a result of what you talked about, I went out and bought a blah, 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 or an XYZ. So we can actually prove it. So now the question becomes, how many people is Bill sort of speaking to on a regular basis? So if I'm vendor number 2, the small vendor, and I'm considering the sponsorship that I'm offering, if I'm putting myself on the other side of this equation, I'm going to be asking, how much are you asking me to spend? What are the dollars? And what am I getting in return? I'm getting this, but really, all of these things that you're showing me I get in return really don't mean anything. What I'm really concerned about is how many dollars out, so dollars out versus dollars in. And that's really my concern. So by getting involved in this sponsorship, I would do that. So what I might ask this vendor to do is I will ask them, let's say, for what I would usually want to do is trying to secure a 12-month commitment, and that would mean, I don't know how to spell commitment, obviously. So I would secure a 12-month commitment, and they would be paying some figure monthly. And what I would do is I would say, well, our normal commitment length would be 12 months, but in this case, why don't we do a 4-month or a 3-month and see how it goes? Now, this will mean that Bill has got to try and, promote without being overly promoting of this particular vendor, and hopefully we find a way, well, we'd have to. We want to find a way to make sure that that vendor can see sales coming. So let's take a hypothetical example here. Let's just say that I got this vendor to agree to give us $500 a month. So how is that vendor going to decide whether or not after 3 months this is a good deal? Well, obviously, let's assume that every unit he sells, he has at least, and these sell for starting at about $3,000, $4,000. I would assume that he has at least $1,000 in profit margin for each unit sold. That's my guess. So if we could show him that at least one per month is resulting from the sponsorship, I would suggest to you that he'd probably renew it. Now, important that we make sure sponsorship. I don't know how that's spelled. Anyway, so I'm hoping that we can set up a system by which we can track the results that Bill does, and there's some various kinds of, including in Web Marketing Magic, where we can set up some tracking software, some tracking mechanisms, so that the sponsor will know that the leads actually came in from Bill. So at $500 a month, if he's making $1,000 in profit from each unit, if we can get at least one per month resulting from the sponsor would be crazy not to continue the relationship and add on to the contract once we're at the end of 3 months. Now, what happens is in a contract like this, what I would say is, look, I'm going to give you 3 months, see how it goes. But if you don't respond to me, within 30 days after the end of that contract, I can offer this to one of your competitors. And if I'm the potential vendor and sponsor, and I get a sale a month from these, I certainly don't want those leads going to my competition. So the pricing of the sponsorship is all dependent on what's the profitability involved. For example, these are one of the more expensive items that Bill might promote. He might also be promoting, microphones and a few other things that are less expensive items. So this all comes down to, what would the proper pricing be for the sponsorship? So a sponsorship offered to a vendor like this one, might end up being $500 a month or more, $750 a month. Whereas for the microphone sponsors, that might be too much. So we might have to have a different price point for them. But my goal would be for sponsorships, my goal for Bill DeWeese is that sponsorships over time will generate, and this is will generate in the near term at least maybe $3,000 a month. That'd be my initial goal. And we'd play it by ear from there and see what happens. So the sponsorships, and I go back to a story that I tell people from way back when I was doing, I was doing videos in the self-storage area myself. And in the self-storage area, there are a number of people there who want to get their names in front of people. And I was able to get, for a single video, I was able to get 2 different vendors. One was a lock vendor. So this was, again, going back to my own stuff. So in the self-storage field area, I was able to get 2 sponsors for a video. This was back 15 years ago. That paid me $500 each, one-shot fee, and I guaranteed them that I would sell at least, I think I said 250 units of the video. Now in the video, their companies were highlighted with a poster behind the actors. So what happened was that these videos, as I recall back then, the videos broke even before 1 unit was sold, which is kind of cool. So in other words, we'd already broken even from our cost of production before 1 unit was sold. I forget exactly how it worked, but it was, basically we were on what's called a free roll, which is that we were basically getting, money for doing it. So this is something that everyone should be considering. It should be something that everyone should consider when it comes to anything that you do in information marketing. You ask yourself, who are my potential vendors? Now, as another example, just to show you this isn't just from one possible person like a Bill DeWeese, and anybody can do this. I just showed you how I did it in self-storage. But what about if, like, I had one person who came to me who was a chef? Well, you ask yourself, what are the possible deals there? What are the vendors? And they would include, food processors. They would include blenders. They would include cookware. They would include knives. There would be a whole bunch of different vendors, for this area as well. So any business you're in where you're doing information marketing and you're getting even moderate exposure to a market, there will be vendors in that market that are potential people for you to get licensing deals from. So I would make sure that you don't sell yourself short and not get some of this. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do some incredible shilling from them, but you do have to do whatever it is you promise, whether that's a banner link on your website, an interview that people can see, all the different things. Make sure you give them what they promise, and also make it so that it's an easy decision for them to say yes. I think in the case of the chef that we were dealing with, this was somebody who I think was the operated in Beverly Hills and that kind of thing. So I mean, again, we could have, if I had pursued that, and I don't think we ended up working together. But if this person had wanted to do something, there would have been some real good licensing possibilities. So that's all I want to talk about in this first section of the webinar, is about those issues on licensing. And I see that I am the only one. All joint venture partners are busy actually doing real work. So what I'm going to do then is, if you know what, I'm going to stick just to this topic. Why don't you send me via the question box there on the GoToWebinar control panel any questions you have about anything related to licensing, because this is something that I know a little bit about and could probably help you. So any questions on this concept of licensing? If you came in a few minutes early, you may ask a question that may already be recording. You know, I'm recording this and I'll put it up shortly. But feel free to ask it. If it's something that I've already covered, I may direct you to the recording. If not, we can answer other questions. So go ahead and shoot me some questions. What do you need to understand to better make money from licensing? All of you presumably are either in right now or going to be doing information products for your business. And so, like, I can think of my buddy, Mr. Palumbo. And John is involved in, let's just say, John, you're talking about, he does stuff in the sales area. And what happens here is, for John in sales, John, what you might be doing is finding, you know, if you're not doing it yourself, which I think you do, but let's just say you didn't do any sales training. You could find a sales training company and say to them, hey, you could sponsor the back page of our workbook or something like that. That would be something. One of the questions Leslie's asking, do you have to have a list in order to attract sponsors? I mean, you have to have a platform in order to attract sponsors, yeah. So in other words, why would a sponsor sign up? So sponsors are asking themselves a couple of questions. They will say, how many people will see my name? How effective will the spokesperson, that means you, be on my behalf? They will also be asking themselves the question, how strongly will they promote me? They'll also be saying, so how many people will see my name, but also which people will see me / my company? So if you only had a list of 100 people, but they were the right 100 people, that would be different than having a list of 100,000 people who were the wrong people. And so depending on who you're going after, sponsors and sponsorships would be easier or less difficult to see. So people want to know, but in the ultimate analysis, sponsors will probably go for a deal where they say, okay, there's a trial period, and it would be show me the money. And if you can show them the money, they will continue the sponsorship deal. If not, they won't. So do you have to have a list? Yeah, unless you have a platform of some sort. You can't be offering somebody a sponsorship, because why would they want to sponsor? It's like somebody buying advertising on a show that nobody watches. No need. It doesn't happen. I mean, why would you do that? Because no one's seeing it. Other questions? Anybody have any other questions with regards to this deal of getting licensing deals? Because there's, you know, all kinds of possibilities available to you out there, and this is, you know, just some examples on how to do this. Any other questions? Come on, ask me, because I'm done with my material. So, you know, this is going to be a quick webinar if you don't ask me any questions, because I'm pretty much done with what I want to tell you, and I just need you to get back to me with what answers or what other questions you have, what answers you need to learn more about this. Now, the other thing that I want to say while you're coming up with any questions is this, that I contact these people, and I'm very kind of, you know, if you'd hear my, you know, my approach is very straightforward, and just said, hey, look, you know, we're looking for something. First off, here's who I am, here's who I represent. This is Fred Gleeck. I'm calling on behalf of Bill DeWeese, And Bill is a voiceover artist who is basically, and this is the line I used, which I thought it was pretty good. I said, Bill is basically the Rafael Nadal of voiceover training, And so I said, here's a guy who is the top dog in voiceover training. How do I know that? Well, take a look at Amazon. You find Bill's book. There it is. It's going to have the physical book up there as well. But the whole idea here is I've got a call telling someone that I represent someone that's a big shot. Yeah, John is Palumbo is saying that I have your target market. Exactly. So in other words, when I call these people, I say I am getting to the people that you really want to get to. I'm targeting these people directly, and they listen to me, and I have them at the right stage of the sales process, which is before they're making a decision to buy. Have I used this on ebooks? Yeah, you know what, Doc? I don't really think that. I guess it would work on ebooks, but now again, it all comes down to platform. So, have I used it on ebooks? Yes, you could put sponsors' names in ebooks, but if you were selling 30 ebooks a month, I'd be a little bit leery as a sponsor unless you could again show me the money. How am I going to be making money? If you put links in there, yeah. Yeah, Leslie's asking if you're a speaker, then it's all about your audience, not necessarily the list. Well, I'll tell you what, your audience is not nearly as important as a speaker as your list, because if you're a speaker, you should have a list built. If you haven't built it, you should be building it. And to have once in a blue moon, or not necessarily. The vendors are interested in you having a relationship with people, and the more people, the better, and having that relationship intact. If you go give a speech somewhere, you have one shot with people. The chances of that being effective, people need to see something over and over and over again. So the chances of a speaker being able to get sponsorship, unless they're doing something over and over again, is low. Whereas if I have a built-in list like Bill DeWeese does, where I'm on Amazon and I have 1,650 subscribers, then it becomes much more interesting to the potential vendor. Not that speakers can't get sponsors, but the only time I've seen speakers get sponsors is if they're, let's say, for example, you're a speaker on nutrition and one of the drug companies or one of the nutrition companies wants to have you going around the country speaking for them, blah, blah, blah. This is much more based on your list. Now, if you were a speaker in a specific field like nutrition and you had a list of 23,000 people, who were on your list as a result of all your speaking engagements, then the nutrition company may want to do something because you're going to be offering them sort of some kind of a monthly deal, which is on my website, they will see this, I will talk about you, et cetera, and they will get ongoing exposure, not one-shot exposure. So that's what the vendors are looking for, is ongoing exposure to large numbers of people. Those are all good questions. So I'm wondering if you have any other questions. I will be happy to answer them. But again, the rest of this is up to you. So.